The current situation in the sector is the consultation, and I'm sure nobody in this room doesn't know about it. But maybe when you guys do your presentation, you might say a bit about it, and then you can ask some questions about it. There's like some weird things in it I'd really like to understand about things like attendance. It's a whole section on attendance, like why is that in there? Is that an issue? And is it an issue for some of you? And that kind of thing. I know the rest of you are like us trying to figure out the guidance about fees and food and fees and food and food and fees. And we were just commenting on that this morning about how hard it must be if you're a standalone setting, trying to navigate the complexities of that. Now, it's nothing to do with you guys, I know, but your pressure is on that, not least then yesterday. There was quite a lot of stuff in the sector yesterday about that Genevieve Meehan situation. And we did quite a lot of press on that to say actually most settings are pretty robust. And the response to have just more regulation, I just really felt it wasn't necessary. I think we're pretty well regulated. And so when they were talking about the 75, somebody might ask you some of this stuff later, the 75 complaints per year, 2.2 million children attend our nurseries every year, 27,000 nurseries. So 75 is very low. So it's like regulation can't be the answer. To me, it was about the willingness for people to actually step up and comment and say something. And if you look at all the serious reviews after children have been murdered by their parents, every single time somebody knew, but somebody didn't do something. Somebody said somebody else should do it or somebody else should do it and stuff. And in the end, the child died. And so that member of staff was 16 years employed. So, please don't tell me she suddenly turned bad, that there wasn't a series of circumstances that drove it to the point where that poor misfortunate child was I think, murdered effectively. And what was the role of everybody else? And, I was saying, like, if they valued early years more, it was a more natural conversation where the value of what we do was out there and appreciated more. If the whole world accepted and the whole of the society accepted that everybody had a responsibility for the welfare of children, then that would be a much more open and trusting environment than what we're getting at the moment, which is the sense of it's a parent's responsibility or it's our responsibility, when actually it's everyone's responsibility. So that was quite a difficult day yesterday, because I think the sector is really getting hammered at all different levels now. But actually what I kept saying to them is, most people in the sector love children. This is why they're there. And they do their very best. And nobody goes in with the intention of harming somebody. But, there will always be bad apples. There will always be bad apples. It's just we have to be better at calling it out or just not putting up with it. So that was yesterday. The funding rules, about the legal challenge in Bournemouth. And I'm sure some of you here, might be part of this early years funding group where they're trying to understand aligning the funding with the rules from the local authority and how the local authorities are interpreting the rules, and they're being quite kind of creative in how they're deciding on them. So there is a group of people trying to kind of connect all of those and find a pattern so that they can go to the department and say, well, really, what is this? Like, how much of this is allowable, not allowable? How are you finding these things? EYT-DA, I don't know a lot about that, and I'm hoping you do, because there's like a ratio implication for that, because that could be taking us to 1 to 13. We're already being squashed into 1 to 5 for some places. 1 to 13, I don't care how many degrees you've got. You still only have 2 hips and a lap. So for me, 1 to 13 might be great on your profit and loss line, but it's not. I can't imagine it's going to be great for our children and to give them the kind of experience that we want them to have. Climate action plans, you know about them? Guys, there's some spare seats up here. And you'll fill in the middle and it'll feel a lot better. So the climate action plans are coming in September. So that's every setting in the UK, in schools and in, and you can hear what we inspect against them. Every setting where there's children, basically. I think even childminders, but I don't know exactly. But somebody here might. Would have to have a climate action plan. And they're currently being developed. The Department for Education is working with the University College London, and we have been helping them because so far they've been a bit of a push down form. We just don't think they'd work very well, and so we're looking at kind of creating ones that are really important for smaller children and would make sense, are meaningful. But they are coming as well along the line. I think their attempt to meet the department's strategic objectives around sustainability, which was to be net zero by 2025, which they've now stretched to 35. But I'm not sure that that mechanism will help you to understand the 3 pillars of sustainability and how your decisions in those areas will drive sustainability and, address bigger issues like, world poverty and climate change and stuff. But we do need to start with the youngest children, and we do need to understand that. So I'm not telling you about it. I'm just alerting you to these things, because sometimes when you're busy, you don't always spot these things, and then the next minute you're overwhelmed. I'll give you some research in a minute. It was an interesting Save the Children report. I don't know if any of you spotted that the other day. And that is looking at the cost of childcare. And they're revisiting the kind of overall costs and stuff. So that's been quite an interesting one. I think you can get that. Maybe it's not out yet, but it's maybe online. And then Rob might want to say something about this. Do you want to say something about this, Rob? Spontaneously and without any warning?
Yeah. Would you want to come to the front?
Yes, darling.
Yeah.
But it is very fascinating what's emerging from that. And Rob is the lead area manager on this.
So we're delivering a project across 4 of our nurseries in Westminster for 12 children. It's called the Bridge Project, and it's providing 30 hours of funded childcare for children that wouldn't be able to access it. So children might have had 15 hours, but we're giving them 30, and we give them not just the extra hours, but they're having obviously the meal in the nursery and also getting additional staff support as well, which is all funded by the Westminster Foundation. And there's sort of 3 aspects to it. It's about the impact on the children, the parents and the staff, and it's a really interesting piece of work because you're looking at how does being in the nursery, we know it works well for the children, but how does it affect the wider family as well? And what the parents get from it. Some really initial, interesting responses from the parents. It's affecting their ability to seek training, go back to work, those sorts of things. The project is there to support that. We know that if the parents already working, they get the 30 hours, but they've already got how to support those that want to get into work. So it sort of bridges that gap. And the home learning is also really important as well, alongside how we can make sure the staff become co-researchers, want the teachers to be co-researchers this project as well, so they can help put that learning out to other teams as well. So that's the sort of broad gist of it. But it's a really interesting project, lots of interesting stuff already come out for it.
Yeah, we posted something on LinkedIn the other day as a first line, just to give you some sense. I mean, none of it is literally rocket science, because we know that if you have children get 30 hours plus additional support, especially targeted children with emerging special education needs, which are off the Richter scale in our experience at the moment, then it's likely to benefit. What we're interested in, though, is what is the kind of magic thread? What is it that they're doing that we can kind of, in a way, bottle and help you to think about this, and then maybe go for more funding around special education needs, but around those things rather than just going on a course or just having it on a SENCO. Because often what we find with our SENCOs is they're drowning in paperwork. So they actually don't have time to model, techniques, or to support parents, or to hold the hand of the member of staff while they're trying to kind of develop a way of addressing it. So again, if you go on my LinkedIn, and I think it's on the Leaf LinkedIn, I think it's cross-fertilized, then you might find it. But it was very interesting for us that it was emerging in that way, because a lot of times that they think of SENDs, the answer to SEND is to go on more training. But actually what we're finding is the way you interact with the children inside, and the way you support the parents in the home learning bridge, that bridging it in and bridging it out, has been much more interesting. Nothing new. It's just about synthesizing things we already know in a different way, I think, sometimes. Isn't
and that small scale group makes it a really qualitative piece of work to give some real meat on the bones of it, to understand what's going on. So it's a really good piece of work.
Yeah. So we're hoping maybe there'll be a wider learning, and maybe other places will look to copy it. It's not particularly expensive piece of work, ironically. I think, Yvonne, is it in your nursery you're doing it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how many children have you got on it?
4.
Yeah. So I think we've got 12 in
12
total.
in total, yeah.
We were quite specific about the children. But one of the things I noticed in the first level of feedback was there's so many children, it was difficult for you to choose which ones.
Sorry. Yeah, it was very difficult, but obviously we looked at the children in really deprived areas. Obviously all children need that support, but it was difficult to choose the children. So I had to look at which ones were really in need of the 30 hours.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a sad situation, isn't it?
And I've been
Okay.
asked all the time for more.
I
More
bet you
children.
are.
Marita's here, she keeps asking me for more. Even though
Yeah.
on the old project.
Yeah.
Some more, so yeah.
I know, yeah. Anyway, so this is just an example of research going on in our organizations that you don't know about, but we are really keen to kind of engage with you on these things and maybe help if you were thinking about this and kind of networking together. I don't think we're going to win any battles without really connecting with each other. And I know people are members of organizations, but sometimes organizations have their own agenda in the sense they have an organizational agenda as well. Whereas I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in us having conversations. So one of the things we set up, Nick helped me with this, he's our sustainability lead, was the Action for Sustainability in Education, which is a LinkedIn group. And that's a really interesting one, and it might be worth joining because that's where we have conversations with people about sustainability in a much broader way with some good ideas. So you might want to join that. And then maybe we need another one that's just about talking about kind of ordinary issues, but we'll wait to hear from you on that. And then just to finish, 3 research papers that you might be interested in to look at. The first was on digital devices in the home. And again, it's an interesting thing in relation to the Ofsted consultation. So in terms of sustainability, you mentioned it only once. I know it's not your consultation, but you mentioned it only once, I think on page 4, where it says sustainable resources, but there's no other reference to it at all. Now, given we have to have climate plans, it did seem to me a disconnect there that needs to be looked at. So that'd be one thing. There's no mention of tech. Now, I know we're not overly keen on tech, but the children are growing up in tech, so we got to do something to help them. So there's no reference to that. So I'm not suggesting we all have them on smartphones, but we do need to think about what does that look like in relation to that. So there's no reference to that either, and I think that's probably something probably a bit of an oversight because we have to teach them how to use it correctly, but we have to teach it in a way that's manageable. We don't want them all on but. And we may well want to have a tech-free space, but we do also need to think about how do we support parents to, recognize the impact of rocking up every morning with the phone, clasped in their hands in the buggy. We've been doing a series of AI blogs to help you introduce the notion of AI to you. And we're looking to create an AI network of people who are interested in the subject. So if you're interested in all, just email me and we'll connect on that because that's such a big subject and such a scary subject and so influential. And we can't hide from it. It's taking over our lives and we have no power on it. So we need to know exactly what we can do. The department has spent £1 million on 16 programs. I don't know if any of you are involved in them. And I just spotted one called Teach Sprite or something. And it's really to help you. So what you do is you do your observation, Jen had a really lovely day today. She lifted her left hand and her right hand and her pins, well done. And her physical development was stretching and, she was doing really good pins to grasp, whatever it is. And then AI will write that up for you and align it to the EYFS and to an early learning goal and set the goal for you. Now, some of you might go, thank God, finally, I'll have people who can write in English, correctly. And some of you might say, my goodness, that's taking the entire agency away from the staff. And it's becoming much more, neoliberal in terms of just following goals and stuff. So I'm not saying it's one thing or the other, but we really need to be talking about these things before it's imposed on us. And then the next minute we're trying to manage something and trying to come at it back to front. So these are the kind of conversations that I think are missing. And the OBC is the only place we can even raise these things, but we do need to be raising them together. So that's that. The Erasmus organisation did one of its updated Eurydice reports. Well, we're a social pedagogy organisation, so we love Europe. So we spend a lot of time looking at what's happening there and how, it's impacting. And so that, if you're interested in a kind of the way the European is playing out in terms of who's accessing free access, what does it mean, what does it look like? When you're writing to your local MP, it is very useful to have some of this contextual information so you can set the scene. It's not a particularly long report, and there's a thing on Google called Elmo where you can get your report converted into audio so you can listen to it. And it's free. I like a font of knowledge here. Yeah. And then finally, Kindred Squared did their annual school readiness survey. Now, we know school readiness is quite a contested concept. So, you know, who's ready for whom? And is it all about school? Is it not about life? Is it not about learning to be friends and all of those things? So I know, but this is the language they use. And they found, they did 1,000 children, 1,000 teachers, and they found that children who are attending school not ready in the sense they couldn't use the bathroom and they were coming in nappies. I asked a random selection of our nurseries how many children are sent from a leaf nursery to school in a nappy, and nobody had any idea that that ever happens. And if it did, it might be occasionally because the child's got a special need. I asked Roz at Bright Horizons, and she said they did a survey because they couldn't understand it either, and 4% of their children, and they were all associated with some level of need. I would ask you guys to also look. I can't imagine a decent nursery ever sending anyone to school by 4 in a nappy. So I don't know where these children are coming. So it'd be very interesting to know where is it happening, what kind of children, and what are we doing wrong, and how are we not guiding parents that they think it's okay. So these are big picture stuff, but they either then define how we look at things and what we need to do support, and what we define as school ready, and what other people define as school ready. For me, I mean, yes, I would want them to go to be able to use the bathroom, to be able to put their coats on, you know, over their heads and on, to be able to kind of, but for me, much more important would be making friends, to feel able to part from their parent without being very distressed, to be able to navigate the routine, rather than necessarily fixating on their toilet training abilities. But these are the things we're up against, guys, and we're the early years, and we too tend to get this in the neck as if it's our problem. So those are the things that we've got. Are there any reports that we should be reading that you've can't put down? You think Netflix or report? I'm going for report every time. Reports that are wet from being in the bath with you because you read them so many times. That's a start.
There's a new one out today, actually, which was very interesting. Not so great for the government. The Centre for Young Lives have just put one out. They've done a big kind of research thing on how the government's failing early years on multiple levels.
Oh, amazing. And can you send us the link?
Yeah, it's just literally.
And I will put it on a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good, very, very useful in terms of
She saved you.
systemic change.
She saved the whole of you. She saved you. Yes. Thank you.
Systemic change needed to save us, basically.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a bit high level, but good.
Yeah. Well, can the market save, you know, the early years? Is the market the best place? And if it is, what kind of a market do we want to be operating in? And is the market now being, in a way, misunderstood and taken over by the government? So now it's a kind of confusion. And school-based nurseries, are they the answer? And so all of those big questions are to be had over a glass of wine, mostly, so that your blood pressure doesn't get so high. But, you know, these are big issues because for us, children in poverty are really being lost in some of these debates. And that really troubles us. So on that happy note, I'm going to hand over to Ofsted, who are going to entertain us with the world of regulation and consultation and improvement.
So it's lovely to be here, everybody. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Genji. I'm the senior HMI in early years in London. It's really great to be here today. In terms of early years, my background is very much, I've spent my whole working life in early years. That's my passion. That's where, so I've been on the receiving end of inspections. I've been a practitioner, I've been a manager, and now I've been an inspector. So everything that I've done in my working life is rooted in early years. So in terms of passion, commitment, you know, that's where my heart is, and everything I do is for the reason that you do what you do. What I'm going to do today is give you a broad overview. I'm going to kind of give the context of where the consultation has come from, and set that out. And then Neelam's going to talk about what that means for early years, and Julie's going to do a bit of a focus on inclusion. So it's not just me standing here for the whole time. So, improving the way Ofsted inspects education. And first of all, I'm going to talk about the background, but I'm going to talk generically about the education inspection framework, and that doesn't just involve early years. So I think giving you that broad overview, and then I'll go through what the proposals mean for you. So I'm going to take us right back to the background to the consultation. You know about the Ofsted Big Listen. This is where the changes stemmed from, in terms of that big listen, and it is very much about building a better Ofsted. Okay, we want to make sure that the Ofsted is a modern, world-class inspectorate and a regulator that is fit for purpose. And so we've had to do, and rightly so, we've had to do a lot of listening, and that was the purpose of the Big Listen. And I've got the numbers there. Now, since obviously the tragic death of Ruth Perry, it's caused us as an organisation to stop and to kind of look outward and inward, and to listen and to hear from a number of people. Now, we ran the Big Listen, and I've got the numbers here. So we had 22,000 responses, including 4,300 responses from children. And it was the biggest consultation or kind of listen that we've kind of ever done before. And it gave us a chance as an organisation to reset, to review our priorities, to look what we're doing, how we do it, why we do it, and the way, and also to rebuild those relationships. Okay. Now, the proposals that have come out of the consultation, we're hoping that will be part of this Big Listen. Okay. So collectively, what do we want to achieve? And this slide here really sets out on kind of what we're aiming for. And I'm sure that you agree with all of this in terms of high quality, inclusive education for every child, pupil and learner, better information for parents, outcomes for everyone, particularly those children with SEND, those disadvantaged children, and a really collaborative and transparent approach to inspection. So this is generally in terms of our education inspection. So we're making changes to our early years, our schools, our further education and skills, and our IT inspections. And that is all encompassing from what we've learned from the Big Listen, okay? And this kind of, the slide here, I won't go through each of them, but this covers kind of what we are looking at, that we need to also tailor that inspection process towards each remit. So it isn't just a one size fits all, it's tailored to each provider type, okay? So schools, whether that's further education and skills, whether it's early years, okay? And this is the really important bit, to make sure that the criteria is really clear and that it's collaborative. I think that's one of the key words, is to making sure that that process of inspection is a collaborative process, okay? So about the consultation, just out of interest, how many of you have contributed to the consultation? Good. So there is time. I would encourage you, it's still open. There is time. Please do contribute. And I think Jim raised a really important point, that, now's the opportunity to share your comments, and they are being heard. They are being heard. So in terms of what we're reforming, and I've touched on these are the different, in terms of the education reforms, these are who will be impacted by these reforms, all the different remits that we work with. So in terms of the consultation, we've got probably about 3 weeks, I think it's about 3 more weeks, 28th of April, I think it is, when the consultation ends. In terms of the piloting, and we're kind of calling them test visits, they are happening now. I'm going to be involved, and we've got some providers that are kind of that want to be involved in that. I'm doing one sometime in May, so I'm going to be shadowing one as well. So we're listening to what we're learning from the test visits as well, but with real caution that we're still consulting, we're still receiving that feedback as well, and then we're looking to roll out all of these providers in the autumn term. Okay. So our proposals, what we're hoping for is inspections that look and feel different for everyone. one of the things that's really important to highlight here as well is about collaboration. That you're kind of not feeling as if you're being done to, but actually you're collaborating together, drawing out areas of inspection focus together with the inspector, and that it is genuinely a collaborative approach. Okay, we want to kind of do our bit to make sure that we achieve those great outcomes together. For you as providers and us as inspectors, that we come in and we're kind of coming at this, we want the same aims and we're working together to achieve that. The other thing as well is that this isn't a complete new, it's a renewed inspection framework. So we're not losing all of that, vast amount of experience and knowledge and research that has already gone into our inspection framework, because it isn't starting from scratch. We are building upon all of that research that we know and that we understand, and that is well supported by important research as well. These are kind of proposing in terms of conducting inspections. This is how we're proposing to conduct. Remember, these are proposals that they promote that professional conversation, that professional collaboration between the inspector and the provider. And part of that is starting with the premise that everyone is working within the legal expectations. We know that we have legal expectations that are set out in law by the DfE, by the government, and that providers are legally required to follow. So that's the premise where we start. But equally, really understanding the context of each setting. And within each setting, within each provision type, there will be a specific, unique context. And also really trying to seek a rounded picture of what you do. What is it like for a child in that setting? What is a typical day for a child in that setting in terms of, and also that there will be aspects you are striving on. There's not perfection. We're not expecting perfection. There will always be things that you're kind of doing really well at and things that you're working on to improve. That is a continuous journey for everybody. And also promoting a self-improving system that is inclusive of all, and it drives those high standards. That's what we want to do together, to drive those high standards so we've achieved the best outcomes for all children. So this is the changes that are going to impact on all remits. So this isn't just early years, this is schools, further education, ITE and early years. So there will be new report cards. I'm sure you've heard that batted around, report cards. So one of the proposals is that there will be new report cards, and that gives parents and stakeholders better information about what the strengths are of the provision and what are the areas for improvement. One of the proposals is about the 5-point grading system. Okay, so that's within the proposals, and the introduction of toolkits. So there's going to be a language change that we need to all get our head around, us included. We've been talking about inspection grades, so our language needs to change, and that will be a process for all of us, inspectors included, to get used to what those changes will be. So we'll be talking about toolkits, and we'll be talking about evaluation areas as well, themes, standards, and making sure that those evaluations are tailored to each setting. Okay. In terms of safeguarding, the proposal is that safeguarding will be either met or unmet. Proposed toolkits. So in terms of the inspection framework, there will be one inspection framework. This is the proposal, and there will be specific separate handbooks for each remit. So an early years, schools, a further, that is specific to that remit, okay? And that will have 3 parts. So in terms of the why, that would be the kind of why we do what we do, the legal requirements in which we operate. The operation would be the how, and that will be specific, for instance, to early years. And then the toolkits will be the what. For me, I'm going to hand over to Neelam now, who's going to talk a little bit more in depth on what that means for early years.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I don't have a naturally loud voice, so if you can't hear me, tell me, I'll try. Okay? It's a big one, is it?
Big one.
Yes, yeah, okay. So what does it mean for the early years? So, as it says here, so we'll inspect the overall qualities and standards of the early years, provision in line with the principles and requirements of the early years statutory foundation state. So these standards are not changing, okay? The EYFS as we know it. There will be a focus on priorities such as the quality of adult interactions and the importance of communication and language and keeping children safe and happy. Also, it will report on what it's like to be a child at this early years setting. We do that anyway as part of our report, if you have a look at them. So there'll be that is still included in there. There'll be a focus on priorities, actions and impact of the setting. So we will continue to do these things. So what are we looking to change? And it is in consultation, okay? So please take this as information that's not been concrete yet, but will be part of the consultation. So there will be new evaluation areas, which I'll talk about in the next slide. There is a proposal to have a two-part notification call, which will gather information about the setting's context, curriculum, strength, and areas of development. There'll be more professional dialogue between inspectors and leaders, and this will be a priority moving forwards. Every provider will be invited to nominate a senior member to work closely with the inspector or the inspection team throughout the inspection. And this person will be the person who knows the setting best and the children best. That's what the aim for that is. We'll also be aim to be introducing an evaluation area on inclusion. And I think Julie will be talking about that a little bit later. Within this, early includes the focus on children with SEND and those who are disadvantaged. And when we talk about disadvantaged, it means those that are eligible for EYPP and those who are deemed to be vulnerable for any reason at the setting. Okay. And aligning the renewed framework more closely with the EYFS. And hopefully this will enable us to undertake dual roles as a regulator and the inspectorate more effectively. This also should give clarity to the sector around expectations and aligning our renewed framework more closely with the EYFS. In short, it's about setting the standards. These are standards set by the DfE. We know that all providers must adhere to those. I'm just making it clear that we're not expecting any more than that from you. Okay, so these are the proposed evaluation areas registered for registered early years providers, and we can see them here. We've got leadership and governance, curriculum, developing teaching, achievement, behaviour, attitudes and establishing routines, children's welfare and well-being, inclusion and safeguarding. So you can see through the 8 proposed evaluation areas, it doesn't mean that we're looking for anything more or anything different than you do currently under the EIF. It just means that we are breaking what we look at into smaller chunks. So we have a more nuanced ability to report and show where the strengths and where there's room to improve. So for example, quality of education is now 3 separate evaluation areas: curriculum, developing teaching and achievement. In regard to developing teaching, we'll be looking at how leaders develop their staff. For childminders, it will be themselves. How do they identify and address gaps in their own knowledge and understand what is the impact and what is the impact on children, particularly for those who are disadvantaged? And inclusion, my colleague Julie will be talking about that in a moment. Welfare covers children's safety, health and well-being, and is more focused on, there's more of a focus around happiness and feelings as well. Safeguarding is more focused on making sure that children are cared for in a safe environment and protected from harm and abuse, and won't be graded on the 5-point scale, but rather than Jen said, it will be a met or a not met.
So my name's Julie Swan, and I know Jen has introduced each of us as we've gone along. So I'm going to talk to you about inclusion, and exactly like Jen said, we are still at the consultation stage at this time. So we've put inclusion front and centre of our renewed framework, and that's simply because we know how important it is for children with SEND and those who are disadvantaged to have the best possible chance in life, and actually the best possible outcomes as well. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides, and this is within our consultation, and this is our working definition of inclusion. So one of our working definitions is that inclusive providers are at the heart of the community. Not only are they at the heart of the community, but they have high expectations and aspirations for every child and learner. They are particularly alert to the needs of those who need the most support to achieve well, including those with special educational needs and or disabilities. This is our proposal, and I'm going to take you back to what Jen said. So each education remit toolkit has a different number of evaluation areas. So within early years, there's going to be 8, and I know that Neelam's already talked about that. There will be 8, and you can see across the top, these are the grades. We will always start on the assumption that a setting or a provision is secure. Exactly like we say now, we always go into a setting under the projection that the setting is good. So secure, so this will mean that the provider is offering at least a secure standard of education, and this will include meeting the EYFS requirements and the expectations that will be set out in non-statutory guidance as well. As you can see, this one here talks about developing teaching. Within each evaluation area, you'll also see that there are themes. So the one on this slide, developing teaching, it starts with the leadership of teaching and then professional development and so on and so on. So each evaluation area within the toolkit starts with leadership of that area. So for example, curriculum will start with leadership of that area under the 8 evaluation areas that we've got for each toolkit. At the end of each evaluation area, apart from the inclusion and the safeguarding one, there will be a theme of inclusive teaching. So as explained in the consultation document, to decide what the grade is, inspectors will focus on the leadership of that area. So they will focus on leadership of the area and the extent of inclusive practice within that area as well. For example, for inspectors to grade curriculum as secure, the leadership of the curriculum and the inclusive nature of the curriculum must be secure. So an inclusive curriculum. So in the evaluation area for curriculum, if a setting is secure in inclusion, its curriculum is ambitious, and it's developing appropriate for all children, including those with SEND and those who are disadvantaged. So it recognises and promotes equality and diversity and supports children to reflect on and understand their similarities and what makes them unique. So the inclusive achievement, children with SEND and those who are disadvantaged achieve well in settings where achievement is secure. Gaps between the achievement of those groups of children and those of children and that of others are narrowing quickly. So we will have a look at those gaps are narrowing quickly. Children with SEND make good progress, particularly in developing their communication and language skills. And then we talk about inclusive behaviour. So practitioners understand and consider each child's context, needs and challenges when managing behaviour, and they make reasonable adjustments. Any adaptations maintain the high expectations of behaviour, and that really is focused on and reflects the child's age and or stage of development. So inclusive approaches to children's welfare and well-being. So our draft toolkit proposes that children, including those with SEND, who are disadvantaged, develop a strong sense of belonging through respectful, warm and positive relationships that promote and support their well-being effectively in settings that take inclusive approaches to welfare and well-being. Where barriers to positive well-being and welfare exist, for example, for some babies and children, practitioners will work closely with families and other additional agencies to support their good development. So ultimately, inclusive settings have inclusive practices. So these are settings where across their work, inclusive practices are secure so that all children feel safe, welcome and supported. They identify and meet needs to remove barriers to learning. So this means leaders quickly and accurately identify children who have additional needs or face barriers to their learning and or their well-being. They make sure that these children receive effective support. They draw on external agencies and specialists where necessary. Leaders have a secure understanding of and effective arrangements to identify the needs of disadvantaged children and those with SEND. And that really it is about supporting disadvantaged children, those receiving those receiving additional funding, and we promote an inclusive culture.
As Jen said earlier, it's about sharing your views. You've got some information now about what some of the proposed changes are going to look like for all of us in early years. So here's how to have your say.